Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Big Bad Online. Look at these beautiful faces. We are so excited to have you here. This panel is, in case you didn't know, from Geek to Super Geek, behind the scenes of running an actual play live stream, to which the three beans that are here as speakers have a lot of experience, and I look forward to helping facilitate this conversation. My name is Jess. I use they, them pronouns, and I will be the moderator of tonight's conversation. Mariam.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mariam. I use they, them pronouns, and I am one of three raccoons in the trench coat, aka the caretakers of Utopia, and also a co host for their Super Geek. And you can find me on Twitter at media_junkie.
Kristen.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. I use she, her pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at Kristen is no Jedi. I'm excited to be here with my wonderful cast members to talk about the show with you. Jeremy, I'll kick it over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy. I use they, them pronouns. You can find me on Twitter and itch at Harper. I'm one of the co-hosts here. Also an educator and a game designer, and excited to be here with y'all.
I'm so excited to be here with you all. For those of you watching, in case you haven't checked it out, these three wonderful beings, Taz Geek, they are a super geek. It is a wonderful show that's just fired up in the past few months of this year, and they're doing so much to highlight games and game designers and people of non-binary and marginalized genders. And you all have hit the ground running. And I think you found a formula that you're gonna maybe share with the crowd, and it's a very strong setup. And I really am excited to hear about how you got to this point here. Let's see. So you make it look easy to run a show. You really do. You make it look easy to run a show, bring it to a stream, let alone a podcast. Do you want to start with how you decided to bring about Taz Geek?
Yeah, I guess I can jump in on that. So initially, this is sort of an homage and kind of in the spirit continuation of She's a Super Geek. Sender had approached me last year about perhaps taking sort of the resources and funds that were left and running a new show that would open it up to more people, and decided to essentially do this. And after that, there was a call for hosts, and that's where Kristen and Jeremy came in. And I think I'm gonna let either of you sort of go on about how we sort of put everything together. I think we had our own like work session 0 essentially once the hosts were decided.
Yeah, we did. When I saw that She's a Super Geek was going to be doing a new project, like Mariam said, kind of a handoff, I applied because I was really interested. I didn't know at the time that Mariam was involved. We had played games together. We know each other, did not know they were going to be part of the project. So I was really excited when I found that out. And Mariam and I actually had a call. They were very specific, which I found very helpful, about here's what the project is. Here are the things we can decide together if you join and when we find a third, so that I knew what I was getting into so that I could say yes or no. Obviously, I said yes. And then we did have our working session 0. It's what it was called. That was the meeting invite for the three of us. But before we get into that, Jeremy, I'll let you talk about how you applied, what your experience was.
Yeah, so I'm definitely the newbie here in terms of the online streaming world. I was a fan of She's a Super Geek. I had found it relatively recently and was devouring as many episodes as I could when they put out the announcement that they were ending She's a Super Geek, but potentially starting a new project. As I read their description and heard on the podcast them talk about how they wanted to pass it off to create a show that really highlighted gender marginalized folks, that created more space for non-binary, gender non-conforming folks in the scene, in the industry. I was just really excited. I put in an application, to some extent, a little bit of a whim, but very enthusiastic application. And yeah, Miriam reached out, and we had a phone call, like Kristen said. And I loved how clear Miriam's vision was for it, but how they also throughout that vision really articulated, similar to what Kristen said, like, this is something that I'm thinking, this is what my idea is for it, but I really want this to be something we can talk about. And we can form together. And I was really excited. I was also just really excited at the idea of having a regular space to play games with awesome people as well. So it was exciting.
I'm going to swing it back to Mariam in the sense of like, so what I'm hearing is the secret sauce is have a show with some sort of very specific mission in mind. In this case, you wanted to highlight both games and people of marginalized genders. And then you cast, you're in an interesting spot, Mariam, as like the starter of this show, that you got to not only cast players, but these people are also your co-hosts. So that's like casting for two very different vibes. How was that for you? Like going over the applications?
It was, I had just, I think, done the applications for Utopia. So for me, it was sort of like, okay, another round of applications that I have to go through and break people's hearts and sort of like, who do I pick? But the advice I think that I was given is that there's nothing wrong with picking, and this is maybe a little counter to a lot of conversations I've had about, friends and coworkers and everything. But it was basically, there's nothing wrong, and in fact encouraged that if you're going to be doing something long term, that you should have friends. And Kristen was definitely someone I'd already worked with, and we knew each other, and I was just like, yes. I just put yes. So it was more really whether Kristen would join in, and I was so happy Kristen said yes. And in the case of Jeremy, your application was just so sincere. Please don't ask me to quote it because it was a long time ago and I don't remember it. But I remember my feelings, which was just like, I don't know if this person's gonna be on my stream, but I want to be friends with them at the very least. And I want to get to know them. And I was really happy that after our first conversation, I was just like, well, okay, I made my decision. If you want it, you have it. And then we had our, because I've done several casting for several shows in the last couple of years, it was essential for me, especially after Time and Again, like to not deal with the drama of later on things down the road, expectations. Very, very important to have that working session zero of just be honest, put everything out there. Like, we're not going to get paid for this, or we're not going to be paid initially, or here's how much spoons I can give. These are all my current other projects I'm doing, and this is how much time I can give, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So casting involved both work and personal synergy, since this is a kind of a long form project for you taking on this show. Another kind of like structural aspect is did you all have to make the choice of, was this a stream first, podcast second? Like, which ones were always on the table when you were inheriting this pitched show?
I think it was always going to be a stream.
Yeah.
First.
Okay.
And then a podcast second. And one of the good things about being part of the Misdirected Mark Network, which we are, is that we have someone who can do some edits to our live stream and release it as a podcast for us. And that was a big part of our discussion in session zero, our working session zero, because I was and still am editing another show. So I couldn't take on any more editing. And of course, Jeremy and Miriam had other commitments as well. So we had to be very honest about our time and our spoons, like Miriam said. But yes, it was always a live stream and then a podcast.
Yeah. I'm hearing that like this working session 0 sounds very vital, and it's definitely something I don't think I've ever called it that, which is really cool for you all to like already use established language to really get down to the nitty gritty at the very beginning. So working session 0 was all about communication and honesty. Were there any points where you laid out your bandwidth or your expectations for the show and you had some sort of like conflict, or how did you work through like compromise and getting everyone on the same page in that session 0? Jeremy?
Yeah.
As the newbie, quote unquote, how was that process for you?
It was fun. I mean, it was, so it's interesting because I don't have as much to compare it to. But I think something I really appreciated was that from the start, I think all three of us were really committed to the fact that we wanted this to be something that was going to be enjoyable for us and was going to be, I mean, still going to take work, but wasn't going to. We didn't want this to be the stressor in any of our lives, the primary stressor, and so we talked a lot about. The ways from right at the beginning, the ways in which show with 3 people, 3 co-hosts allows us to, if one of us needs to take a break or one of us has something come up, that we could really support each other and step in. And that was something I really appreciated, as well as just there was a lot of candid conversation about what are the skills I bring to this? What are the things that I'm excited about? What are the things that I'm really not excited about? Like again, this conversation about editing came up. I think I was the only person who was excited to get involved with the social media. That was something that sounded really exciting to me. So I take the lead on most of the social media, whereas say Miriam has a lot of that production skills and takes the lead on the production piece. But I think for me, because I didn't have the direct experience, it was also part of the conversation was thinking about what are the things I bring from other work I've done, from other things I've done. Again, my background is in education, and I've done a lot of teaching online, especially over the past year, a lot of workshops. And so I was thinking a lot about like, what are the skills I can bring to this? And how does that fit in? Can the two of you help me understand how that can fit into the structure? Because I don't necessarily know what the structure is. And they were great about that.
Yeah. I think the in-between for this show is a lot of people who think about wanting to bring their table online kind of just jump from being an offline campaign to an entertainment piece in the streaming module. But you all went a next step further before you even went live, and we're committed to being a stream, but we're also committed to being a podcast. And there's all sorts of things that someone like Kristen could bring into the fold, and a sort of workflow and structure that happens in podcasting, but not always in streaming, that I think works really well. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that I learned, like a lot of people do, I learned kind of the hard way on the fly with podcasts, right? You're like, I'm going to start a podcast with some amazing people. And we're going to play fun games, record, editing is going to be fine, right? And then you find out 5 hours worth of audio and chit chat later that although you had a great time, like it needed to be structured, right? And so I think that luckily I had learned how to structure recording a podcast, and the way we did that was to act like it was a live stream. So we get on, we say hi, we do our tech checks, and then when we hit record, even though no one is watching us, we are not dropping out of game unless we need to. Obviously, self-care and safety is always first, but that structure needs to be there. And so I think bringing that to the live stream was actually fairly easy, but needed. It's something that I'll never want to go back to, kind of that free form. It needs to have some sort of structure so that we all know like what to expect when our breaks are. And I think it makes things easier for the audience and the editing as well as ourselves.
Mm-hmm. You're alluding to it. You're saying it so nicely, but that's a big stream versus play kind of conversation. The concept of having table chatter and how that interrupts your show.
Yes.
I'll open up the floor if you have thoughts and feelings, because I'm sure you do, about the difference between playing for fun and playing for a show.
I feel like this is where I lean forward and go like, this is where my skills this is where my education in film and TV comes into play.
Yes.
But for me, it's actually very, like, when I started live streaming APs in general, it to me felt like absolute chaos, because I came very much from everything scripted, one single hair in a person's head has already been intentionally placed in the frame before we even hit record or live. So for me, it was a little refreshing of live stream of like, okay, I don't have to worry about the post edits and everything, but to make something engaging, because it's one of those things where an AP that is not intentionally sort of thought out from beforehand, it can be entertaining, but more often than not, to someone who is not at the table, it's not very entertaining. And you have to think about the things like the big gaps of silences, making sure that you do your session 0 ahead of time, unless your episode actually is about session 0. Doing your character creation ahead of time, and like Kristen had said, of like having structure. We actually have a bit of a script that is a template of like, here's how we're going to do our intros, here's how we're going to cut to break, here's how we're going to come back from break, and here's how we're going to end the stream. Mainly for those who are doing the VODs and the podcast later, but also for us to know what to do, rather than be like, oh, okay, someone said we have a break now. Okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to break now. Bye.
It is a lot when it comes to live streaming. If you have little like essentially like blocking in theater, right? You kind of chunk out the times and know the general flow, then you can kind of allow your story to breathe in between the structure that you need for it to be a consumable piece of media. We've talked about clear expectations and go ahead.
I was just gonna to jump in at something else I was thinking about when you were talking about some of the pieces that we do beforehand. I think something else that's been really, really helpful for us. So we're a one-shot show, and so we have different guests every time. Typically, so far, I think we've managed to have the designers for every episode. So the designers of the games, and so we have that conversation with them too about like what makes the most sense here for this game. Like, are there things that we can do beforehand, like character creation, or and obviously we do safety tools and that sort of thing beforehand. But and for some of the games, they've been really explicit of like, these are the things we need to do ahead of time. These are things we can do asynchronously ahead of time. These are things it would actually be helpful for us to meet and sit together and figure this piece out. So I think working with the designers to figure out what makes the most sense for the games we're playing has been really, really useful too.
Agreed.
100%. There is a time and place for improv and for you all to shine performatively, but like when it comes to safety and structure, communication is key once again, right?
And I just want to add one more thing also, is especially with games, we do ask them how much time makes sense, because like our format is 2 hours, mainly because I think that is a nice time for people to be engaged and have their face on, but also if a game requires like 4 hours, for example, it's much easier to break it up into 2 episodes that are easier to digest than one long 4 hour where, when we get into hour 3, we're already like, why are we still here?
Yeah. Remind me again when your show went live on Twitch.
It was, I would say, early July.
Okay.
I have the memory of a goldfish, so please
Right.
don't put me in
All
exact
the
things.
neurodivergent beings were like, time is a lie, right? But
It was
July
like
sounds correct.
Early,
Yeah.
it
Yeah, I
was
think
like
it's July.
first or second week of July.
Okay, so like you had ramp up, you publicly announced it, and then you went live with your first episode in July. Now you get into some meat and potatoes, like this truth bomb right here, the secret sauce that you all worked how many months prior to that,
I think 3 or 4.
queuing up content,
Oh, yeah.
and establishing the show and establishing your workflow. How many
Yeah.
months?
I think February was when I actually did the interviews. And then, like a couple of weeks later, we had our working session. So I'd say probably March in earnest, we were starting to.
Yep.
So that would be
Yeah.
4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
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 And we're
Okay.
always working at least 2 or 3 months ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and that working 2 or 3 months ahead has meant like booking the guests, making the plans, coordinating with folks, getting them onto our Discord where we do all the planning, all of that sort of thing, and sometimes even planning to like if we need to record an episode ahead of time.
Right. And going back even to the beginning, what we were doing in March is one, having that session 0 where we talked very honestly. We might have done that a couple of times.
I think we
And
did.
then also getting everything ready. So we had our Twitter handle, we had to come up with our name and then our Twitter handle and then our PayPal,
Or assets.
All the
Patreon.
boring parts,
All the
right?
boring parts, right? Who's going to handle the money? Who's going to handle, all of that had to be done before our faces were ever live.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Graphic
you spent-
design, fashion.
Yeah. You spent 4 months before the show even made it to other people's eyeballs. No gratification for you all. Behind the scenes, going over your vision, your purpose, your goals, and then queuing up content. Like that, I think is, honestly, it kind of is a point of contention. Some people truly believe like if your show exists on stream, it's supposed to be a live stream and it's supposed to be always, we go live and we're doing full improv. But I hate to break it to you, some of your favorite Twitch streams, actual plays, are not live.
Yup.
Yeah, so like how does the concept of pre-recording or at least pre-planning and knowing when these shows are going to happen, how does that help the rest of the non-fun parts of an actual play show in terms of the business, the social media? Maybe I want to pass that to Jeremy first.
Yeah, so I can talk about the social media piece. The planning ahead of time has been super useful. It allows allows me to think longer term, allows us to think longer term in terms of like when it makes sense to put information out about what's coming out, to create a routine, and even to I mentioned this when we were chatting beforehand. A tip I got from Jess originally was to block out time on my schedule and plan social media, at least posts, at least initial posts, in like an hour or two block, a couple hour block at one point during the week, and then plan out for a week or plan out even for a couple of weeks. Set things to schedule to tweet later. So that we can, and having that, because we're already planned so far out in advance, it's easy to do that, at least with the ones that I know we're going to do. We're always going to announce the game no longer than a week out. We will announce when the podcast drops. We'll announce, 24 hours roughly until our game, 1 hour until our game, 10 minutes, that sort of thing. And some of those things, just planning it ahead of time takes that stress off, so it doesn't have to be something you're constantly engaging with. And allows when I am engaging with it to be a lot more fun. It allows it to be a more fun part, because then when I am actively on the TazGeek Twitter account, I can be engaging with people and having conversations instead of focusing on making sure I get that specific advertising announcement written and out.
Yeah, separation of workflow is super important when you're treating something like, I think we've all met via online first, and that's how we ended up networking, because tabletop is our passion. But then you get into that position where you start a show and you have to transition to using it as also a marketing platform and still being able to keep up genuine engagement. Did you want to talk more about the marketing aspect now, or do you want to save that a little bit for later?
I definitely can. Either way, it's less about the specific piece of the planning ahead of time, but
Yeah, no, 100%. But like marketing is key for you all are doing this out of the passion. So like I want to be clear that these three, as talented as they are, this is a passion project, and they've committed and treat it like work, but also put their heart and souls into it. They're all wearing many hats. All of you are doing so many skills. And I wish we could, eventually get to Taz Geek that it allows you to compensate for your time. But you're doing this out of the goodness of your hearts and the fact that you believe in these games. So if you have a show, you want people to watch your show or listen to your show, and part of that is marketing. What do you do, Jeremy? How do you approach that?
Yeah. So like you said, like we if we have a show, we want people to watch it, and especially because I think the really the core of this show for us has been to highlight these highlight gender marginalized GMs, to highlight a diverse cast of folks in the TTRPG scene, to create more space and more visibility for folks. And for us to create more space and visibility, we have to be visible. People have to be seeing us. I'm the first to admit
it.
Yes, it does help that we inherited it. Yeah, we have a certain amount of audience built in, and we have a lot of support from the Misdirected Mark network that has been huge. So the Misdirected Mark network, and that's even part of the larger Gem Collective, which includes the Encoded Designs and Gnome Stew. Gnome Publications.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And so having that being part of that larger network definitely gives us exposure and gives us a lot of support. And then in addition to that, I'm learning a lot as I go. And so I think for me, that's meant paying a lot of attention to the accounts that I follow, that I'm most excited about, and what are the things that help me be excited about following them. I'll give a shout out to Transplaner as one of the ones. I think they do a fantastic job of, they are part of what really inspired me to want to stay actively engaged with people and have real conversations and show up in really genuine ways in these building relationships online, on our social media. Seeing ourselves as part of a community, and anything we do on there is
You said the C word.
You did it.
Building that community. Yeah.
You said it. You got to stand by it. Community is a strong word, but no, I say that in jest. I do really feel the love. I think you all truly, some people embody it, some people don't, but Taz Geek has a community, and it's only going to get better from here. I think this is a really good time to inject a question from the audience that's specifically for Mariam. Mariam, what was unexpected when making the switch from running shows on other people's channels to starting up your own channels?
The quick answer is remembering that I'm also on screen rather than not. So I had to have a little more face and not look like my resting producer face, which is just 1,000-yard stare because I'm looking at 300 screens. But I think there's a certain it's a little bit of creative freedom, but also responsibility, because when you're running other people's stuff, it's a little easy in that sense of like you're given everything and you push buttons and make sure everybody looks nice and do your transitions and do all of the things that a producer does, and or even running. And then when it's your own show, you kind of have to remember to do all the other things that were supplied to you. But at the same time, you could do it however you want, which is amazing. So I think that's sort of the switch there. But also remembering, especially if you're running everything, that, and if you have a team, make use of them. Don't expect to do everything, which is one of the things I love about our team here, is that I'm not very good at social media. So it was wonderful that Jeremy wanted to take that. And as hard as it might be to believe, I am a very awkward person, and I'm not very good at cold calling or asking people to come on shows. So it's very nice that Kristen likes or is happy to take that on. So I get to focus on things that I feel I'm good at, which is production.
Mhm.
I'm not a graphic designer, but I'm willing to do the work, and all of those things.
What a mood.
Graphic design is my passion, not my career.
Gosh, that was me all weekend for sure. Yes, I think I want to bounce it off to Kristen a little bit on like we're all a little neurodivergent, and making the show sustainable. Like you all have talked about how you communicated from the gate, but how do you feel this show is sustainable in terms of keeping the passion, the energy, and making sure the work and play balance is there for you?
I think having a good foundation, which we've already gone into detail about, and then constant communication, right? So if one of us is having a rough week for a reason X, then communicating that and seeing how that person can maybe get help if possible, if the others are available. I know we've only been doing it for a few months. Life has come up a couple of times, and speaking for myself, my experience has been like I've been more than willing to help step in and do things, and they have both been more than willing to step in and help me. So I think being a team and keeping that communication going, also taking breaks. We are taking a break for part of December and all of January, I think. And so and when I say break, I mean from the live stream. That does not mean we will not be having our biweekly meetings, but we're taking a break from at least the live stream. And
December's definitely the break.
True. December's the break. Yeah.
But January is no live
stream. But we're easing back into it. So even doing that, even saying, let's just take a complete break for December. And then in January, instead of just feeling bad for taking a month off, let's just ease back into it by meeting again, doing our planning for the year, and then start the stream back up in February. And I think doing that self-care from the beginning is going to help us avoid that burnout, at least for a while, because we have those things built in already.
That's beautiful. I think a lot of people we tend to think like, oh, if we just chase the dream, we get going, then it'll all level out and it'll be just regular. We can pump out regular content, which will be good for us. It'll be okay for us, and it'll be great for the audience. But like, you all have been honest with each other from the gate. So what I'm hearing, the key to sustainability is still communication, constant communication, and acknowledging each other's strengths and weaknesses so that you feel well supported, so that you can uplift when someone needs a break. You can step it up, and you have that balance, you have that support network, and knowing when to take a break and that it's okay.
And if I may interject a little, when we're as hosts, we're 3 hosts, and we're also 2 other players. When we are doing shows and someone's a host, they're only responsible for one of at least 3 shows, which means and considering we're bi-weekly, so that's once every 6 weeks at the least, that you have to be in charge of getting a host. And not that they do it completely on their own, we all chip in, but the responsibility is once every 6 weeks, which also helps with that work balance.
Yeah, excellent point.
And something else I would add that I think has been a huge help, and maybe goes without saying, but I think the relationships you have with the people you're working with. I mean, Miriam said from right at the beginning that Like they were excited to work with Kristen because they knew that they were excited to work with Kristen as a person, and they were excited about my application because they felt like I was someone they could be friends with, and I felt very much the same. That I was from the beginning. I felt like these are two people that I really connect with. It's wild to me that I've known the two of you less than a year.
I know.
Like when we started talking about numbers, that blows my mind because
Mhm.
it feels so comfortable. And I think that communication has gone a long way. But I think again, I mean, if it's people that you enjoy spending that time with and that you feel comfortable and safe with, that makes a big difference.
Agreed.
I'm going to ask one tough question. And when it comes to show running, podcast running, how much of the metrics come into your 2-week conversations? Like, what are numbers that are important to you, and how often do you check them,
Yeah.
if any at all?
We do not check our numbers often currently because we're just starting. And I mean, I know we started in July, but it takes time to build an audience. And so I think that, and I don't want to speak for obviously Miriam and Jeremy, but in my mind, the focus is on the content and the work and making sure that we are having a good time and putting out a good product. And then we can like look at the numbers and look at the marketing and see how we might want to increase those. Because of course they're important. Of course we want people to watch. And not just because we want people to watch us, we're highlighting GMs of marginalized genders. We want these people to be seen. We want their games to be purchased. So that's important to us. But yeah, we haven't checked the numbers too much. Unless Jeremy's checking them weekly and I don't know about it.
No, so definitely not checking the numbers in terms of like podcast downloads or anything like that. Like I'm keeping a closer eye on the numbers in terms of Twitter and like I mean, followers is the easy one, and we've actually done a couple of pushes early on with giveaways that we worked with the designers to do giveaways, or we even used some of the budget that we had to purchase copies for giveaways as a way to boost exposure early on. And then I've started to play with looking at Twitter analytics a little bit just recently. Actually, I haven't chatted with either of y'all about that, but because I'm just starting to like figure
my
out
DMs
what that
are open,
the things on
Jeremy.
there. Yep, I'll be reaching out. Don't you worry.
Yeah. Marketing is something that is definitely going to be on our to-do list when we're on our break. Right now, like initially it was all about content, guests, and just getting out there and just seeing what the reception would be at all. And it's been interesting that I think we have a bigger podcast following than are necessarily a live stream, and that's not a bad thing because we
I don't think that's on you. That's definitely the audience in the market.
Yeah, we inherited a podcast, so it makes sense that our podcast numbers are higher. But I think in terms of metrics, no, we really weren't looking at that when we started off. But then the key thing is if you're starting any sort of a show, you need to build that in at the start if that's what you're concerned about.
Right.
And that wasn't our concern at the beginning.
Which is healthy.
And I will say that like I think I very much I was thinking about this. And I think I approach this. So some of my background is also in community organizing, and I think I approach this very much from the kind of the one-on-one, like the one-on-one conversation kind of organizing model of like each one reach one, like slowly building connections and relationships and with people kind of one at a time here and there to get people more. Again, I'm more interested in the building community piece and building a community around TasGeek and through TasGeek than the numbers.
And
100%.
there.
Yeah. I I think this is a good point because there's one, I want to make sure there's an ending point to the panel topic. So there's one last question I see queued up. I say one last, but this is the serious question, so I want to make sure it gets in before time. For the table, someone asks, is there any advice you have for beginning actual play podcasting? Specifically.
That's a whole other panel.
Right.
I think the quick notes would be that definitely, especially if you're not starting off with friends and you're doing casting, make sure you take that time to do those session zeros of workmates, because that will learn from me. Like, learn as I do, say as I do, not as I, or whatever that
That
phrase
one.
is.
Yeah.
That one, that thing. Of really taking the time to know who you're going to be working with, because you're going to be spending a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
And you're going to be, and especially at the start, unless you have some sweet seed money, there's going to be a lot of extra hours and labor and like unpaid everything. So you have to make sure you're okay with that and everyone is on board with that. And yeah, it's like intentionality and communication. Those are the two big things about starting. All the other stuff about what to get, what's great for whatever, that all will come with time. The biggest thing is making sure the group you have is a group you want to work with from the start, like from startup, essentially. Think of a podcast as a startup in a way.
A bounce off, like, do you think it's harder to start a stream or harder to start a podcast if you're brand new to either show running?
If you don't have an editor, I would say podcast. Do not underestimate your editor. I know, because I've been one, and that's part of why I like
Poor
live
Kristen.
streaming.
Yeah, I would say if you, for some reason, don't have an editor and think maybe you want to take on the editing, I'm sure you can. I'm not here to discourage you, but please learn.
It's a
from
whole
my
new oyster.
mistakes.
Mhm.
It is, I promise you, if you haven't done it before, it's more than you think. So just really look into it.
10 times the time.
Yeah, really look into it. And, if your podcast, if you have 4 hours of recording, you are editing for 6 hours, 8 hours. I mean, seriously. So just the editing piece is a big one. And I think also, if you're going to kind of deciding where you're going to put your podcast, are you joining a network? And if you are joining a network, learning about that network. What's their mission statement? What other shows do they have? Is there any crossover? What do ads look like? Are there contracts? So all of those things that I think people don't immediately think of, because why would you think of that immediately, is also another good thing to consider before you actually get started.
And what they can give you versus what you can give them.
What that partnership looks like. Yes.
Yeah. In terms of specifically beginning actual play podcasting, the other thing is it kind of depends which branch. Is it friends to podcast or recruiting and casting for a podcast? Either way, it doesn't really matter. You should be having that session zero and establish what skills you all have verbally as performers to bring your actual play to life in terms of entertainment, because the podcasting industry is much larger than the live streaming actual play industry in terms of audience, because it's a passive audience. They can consume it at their leisure on their way to work or whenever, right? So there's way more downloads to podcasting than it is like someone can tune in when you are live. So you have to make it entertaining, and the consumer base there is going to kind of expect more. And so it's less about equipment. Go ahead. Sorry.
No.
Oh, no. Yeah, less about equipment, because, like, you all have fancy mics on your phones. If you put in the work to learn how to edit, like, that is a lot. 2, maybe 3 to 1 ratio of, like, record time to editing. But getting your intentionality and your skill sets and being able to highlight those skill sets as a story is going to be key.
I was just going to say super quickly that I think you can't overestimate how valuable planning ahead is. Like we talked earlier about the fact that we plan months in advance in terms of booking guests, making schedules, all of that. With podcasting, one of the benefits is that you can plan, you can do more ahead of time. Like I know I have heard people, including people on this call, talk about how important having those backlogs are. There are some folks who will try and run with 1 or 2 episode backlog, and there are other folks who will run with months of backlog as much as possible. And really the further you can plan ahead, especially at the beginning, the more of a favor you're doing for yourself. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I think this is a good time to squeeze in your last final words of encouragement for anyone trying to bring a show in. Technically our last audience question is, why are y'all so amazing? Less a question, more a statement. So
last thoughts. Yeah, I hope that this has been helpful and not discouraging. I think that was not our concern, but we all were on the same page in planning for this panel, that we wanted it to be encouraging, right? We want more people to play games, make streams, especially if, are you a POC, queer? We want to hear you. We want your voices, please, at the table. There's just a good amount of work. And so do your research, and there is a good, Jess, community group of people who are willing to answer genuine questions from nice people under the right circumstances. And so if you use your resources, then you can absolutely do something like this. So I hope people feel encouraged.
it's there, right? Communication, intentionality, mission statements. It's that you can do it. Anyone can do it. And you have people and networks to reach out to, including these 3 beans. They have been very vocal online to be like, hello, I'd like to share my advice. And they made time to be here at this panel. Do you all need to do outros? We need to formalize, like, we remind them. What are you doing? What's your relevancies? Jeremy?
Sure. Jeremy, you know that by now. They, them pronouns. I'm a queer, multiracial, Black educator, streamer, game designer. I'm really interested in making games that are about the complexities of building and engaging in relationships and community as a marginalized person in a world that's sometimes hostile towards us. You can find my stuff on Harper on itch, as well as Twitter. And I'm going to stop talking so there's time for the others.
Kristen!
Hi, I'm Kristen, she, her pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at KristenIsNoJedi. I'm a tabletop role-playing game designer, writer, live streamer, podcaster. I have a couple of big projects going on right now. One of them is Adorablins, which is a family-friendly, rules-light role-playing game that is being co-published actually by my company, Dice Up Games, and also Letterman Games. And all of the amazing, adorable art is by Amber, who's at Rocket Orca. So that's my big thing right now. Miriam?
Oh, thank you.
So I'm Miriam, they, them pronouns. I'm a queer, neurodivergent, South Asian TRPG writer. I've written for games like the Lost Omens, Mwangi Expanse, Thirsty Sword Lesbians. I recently just came out with Flats and Fangs, which is my first one-pager where you play vampire roommates. And you can see me online on Twitter at media_junkie, as well as as a caretaker for Utopia. And here. And if you have a game that's coming out and you want it to be featured on our show, please contact our Twitter. And we're going to be working on some way of sort of pitching to us rather than kind of poking on Twitter. So stay tuned for that. And
Perfect.
That's me.
Excellent. And you're also the producer extraordinaire. Thank you for doing that tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it, right? We're at time. You all did wonderful. I hope you found, as an audience, this panel very useful, because we deserve to have all the shows that you deserve to tell the stories. You deserve to entertain people. So go, be forth, do with this information that you will. take care. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you. Reach
Thank
out to
you.
them.
And thank you so much for
Thanks.
modding.
Thank you, Jess.
Pish, pish, pish,
Thanks.
pish.
All right, I'm gonna go to the screen now. Bye.
Bye.